Hi all, thank you for joining. We'll give it another couple of minutes just in case there's any stragglers. I don't know if you can comment or not. Can you still hear me okay, Naomi?
Yeah,
cool.
loud and clear.
I think Rebecca's going to put a survey in the chat. She might have done it already. About how you would rate your knowledge on TPIF before the meeting and then how you'd rate your knowledge on TPIF after the meeting. So please do fill it out when that drops. There it is. Thanks, Becca. Okay, it looks like the numbers are stabilising. Let's make a start there. Some housekeeping to start with. Just say thank you all for joining this How to Apply webinar for the Tree Production Innovation Fund, or TPIF. If I say TPIF, that's what I mean. My name's Jack Clough. I work with the Forestry Commission, and one of the grants I oversee is the Tree Production Innovation Fund. On the call from the Forestry Commission, we also have Noemi from my team and David as well. Those of you who are grant agreement holders will hopefully recognise their names or faces. We've also got Rebecca from our comms team too. The presentation we're about to go through, it's split into two halves, and the first will go through the grant objectives and eligibility criteria, and the second half will be a bit more practical and talk you through how to go about actually making your application and the form itself and what that looks like. We probably won't need the full hour, but we wanted to make sure there's plenty of time for questions at the end if you have any. So please use the Q&A function or the comments and we'll read them out and respond to them at the end of the session where we're able to. Lastly, before we start, there's loads of information on the slides I'm about to share. Please don't worry about making loads of notes. All the information is available on .gov. We can share slides as well and request if that would be helpful. And we're also recording this session and that'll be made available in due course via FC channels. I think it's been on YouTube in the past. So moving on, what is TPIF? So TPIF supports projects that enhance UK tree production methods. Government has set legally binding targets to increase tree and woodland cover to 16.5% in England by 2050. And to this end, TPIF encourages the development and adoption of new technologies or ways of working that will do the things on the slide listed in the bullets. So we've got improved productivity and resilience practices, improve the quality of seeds and trees produced, ensure that genetically diverse material from a range of both species and provenances is available, and to create resilient treescapes. What are we looking for from you guys? We're looking for innovative projects with outputs that will better equip nurseries or tree seed suppliers to supply the trees that we need for new woodlands and urban planting projects. To be eligible for funding, your project needs to address one or more of the following challenges identified through stakeholder engagement as barriers to tree production. I think, Noam, if you could drop a link to the challenges in the chat, that would be fab, and people can scroll through as I'm talking them through them. So challenge one is geared around making efficient use of FRM or forestry productive materials. So a range of issues can lead to a low conversion rate of FRM, so that's seed, vegetative material, into trees for planting. FRM is also in limited supply, and it's really important that we make good use of what we do have available. Challenge two, slightly related, is focused on making sure that we have a diverse and resilient supply of FRM, so that's seed, vegetative material, and saplings. Increasing the variety of species, provenances, and genetic diversity of our treescapes can help improve resilience to pest diseases and the changing climate. So as well as ensuring efficient use of FRM, we want to support projects which can contribute to its diversity. Challenge 3, a little bit different, invites proposals looking at how automation or new tech can be used to enhance productivity. A lack of access to labour can be limiting to tree production, and repetitive tasks like grading trees, so sorting them based on size or quality, could be made more efficient through the use of automation and robotics. Challenge 4 is weed and pest control. So here we're looking for innovative, sustainable means by which weeds or pests can be controlled in both bare root and cell-grown tree production contexts. Challenge 5 is sustainability. So here projects might explore means to enhance the efficiency of production by developing new ways to reduce or manage inputs. So things like water, peat, or single-use plastics. Challenge 6 is weather. So the UK is experiencing changes to its climate, which are expected to intensify in future years. And these changes pose a risk to tree production, and extremes in weather can be quite difficult for growers to manage and mitigate. Challenge 7 is biosecurity and could be addressed by projects exploring how new technologies or processes could help growers to achieve biosecurity standards or to encourage wider uptake of best practice, like the Plant Healthy certification scheme. Challenge 8, last but not least, is tree establishment. So whilst it's all well and good promoting tree production, we also want to make sure that the trees that we do put a lot of time and effort and resource into growing can survive when they're planted out in the wider environment. So here, projects looking to enhance tree establishment rates would be eligible for funding. Who can apply for TPIF? It's open to a wide range of applicants, including but not limited to the list of organisations shown on the screen at the moment. We've previously seen successful applications from universities, research institutes, NGOs, charities, startups, tree growers, and more. If you think you can address one or more of our challenges, we'd love to hear from you. We strongly encourage applicants to partner with industry, for example, tree or seed producers where appropriate. Often they're the strongest applications we receive. And projects previously funded through TPIF are eligible and encouraged to apply. So if you're applying for an extension of a previously funded project, you should provide information on potential routes to market or commercialisation plans with your bid. The lead applicant named on the form must be a UK-based business, sole trader or organisation, and public bodies are required to partner with a private sector third-party organisation to be eligible for funding. And lastly, Forestry England, so FE, and Forest Research, FR, are not eligible for grant funding under TPIF, but they can be subcontracted on behalf of eligible organisations to complete TPIF-specific work packages where their experience is required for the project. What funding do we have available? So we've got up to 3 million over the next 3 financial years, so you can apply for projects that are realistically, there'll be 2.5 years in total with the amount of this financial year we have left, and projects will need to end by the latest March 2029. If your proposal, if it's single or multi-year, it needs to have a minimum cost of £20,000 to be eligible for funding, and your project can't exceed £200,000 in any given financial year. So the theoretical maximum would be £600,000 over 3 financial years, but we would encourage you to be cost effective with your bids, so don't just max it out without reason. Our panel have pushed back in the past on bids that just put the maximum number in. Eligible costs. So what will the grant pay for? Personnel costs, so for staff employed on the project, can be funded, and these can include overheads that directly impact and support the project, but can't be identified as a direct cost. When calculating your overheads, to incorporate into the personnel costs, and we'll come onto the spreadsheet and what this looks like when you're preparing your bid later, please bear in mind that TPIF is a competitive process and your project and associated costs will be assessed against applications from other organisations. And again, where costs are deemed to be excessive or day rates are excessive, our panel have pushed back in the past. Equipment depreciation can be paid for. Again, we'll come on to what this looks like a bit later in practice. So here we can pay for equipment with a lifetime beyond the project, but you can only claim for the proportion and period that the item is used on the project, and it needs to be for something that's purchased after the grant agreement starts. We can also pay for materials and supplies, so consumables, travel and subsistence, so project-related travel, reasonable accommodation, meals, works and services, and equipment that has not been depreciated. Again, we'll come on to the distinction between equipment that needs to be depreciated and not depreciated later. But equipment that doesn't need to be depreciated tends to be items that are integral to your project delivery or will form part of your output, or if it has a short lifespan. What we can't fund are overheads that will not directly impact or support the project, any costs incurred outside of the funding period, including those involved with preparing your application, depreciation costs for equipment that have been purchased outside of the funding period, subscription or license fees extending beyond the funding period, and costs that are being met by another grant scheme. Obviously, we can't countenance dual funding. So this slide gives a few examples of the sorts of organisations we've funded in the past through TPIF. So as I say, it's quite diverse. And also on the right, the pie chart gives a flavour for the types of projects that they've worked on. This needs to be updated from last year actually, but it's still fairly representative. And you can see from the pie chart that the biggest sections are, or the areas where we've funded the most projects to date, have been tree breeding, genetic resources, the development of sustainable grow media, alternatives, and tree seed research. That's not to say we favour projects of these types over others. If you've got a proposal which addresses one or more of our challenges, we'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in these areas of research or projects that people have worked on in the past, then I would suggest having a look at our successful project lists and case studies, which are available online. And I think Naomi can drop a link to the round 4 projects at the moment. In particular, because the round 4 projects will be live, many of them will be 3-year projects that have about a year and a half left on them. I suggest having a look at projects funded through that round, because there may be either opportunities for collaboration, or it might make you think twice before you apply for something that we've already funded quite a substantive project on. How to go about making your application: you'll need to submit an application form for TPIF, a finance spreadsheet, a project timeline or Gantt, and evidence of financial viability where applicable, and we'll come on to that later. And you'll need to submit your applications to the TPIF mailbox, which is shown on screen, by 11:55 p.m. on the 29th of July. We will aim to notify applicants of their funding decision by the 16th of September 2026. Some offers can be offers in principle, which mean that realistically you might not start your project until October. Again, I'll mention this later on when we come to the flow diagram of what happens after you submit your bid. So that is sort of the first half. Granted, it's a slightly shorter half, but it summarises the background to the grant, eligibility criteria, and the next half is focused on the form itself, how we go about scoring your bids, and how you need to present your costs to us. Okay, so what you should do before applying: attend this webinar, is a great one, so thank you for being here. As well as this, we suggest you read our How to Apply for TPIF guidance, which is available on .gov. I think, Naomi, if you've not already, if you could drop a link to the application form, it's on that page. Make sure that the items you want to purchase and the activities you want to carry out are eligible for funding. Make sure you've got the funds available to purchase items and or pay for work up front, because the grant is paid in arrears, and you should go about and get quotes from your suppliers and partners so that we know that your costs are relatively accurate, or as accurate as they can be. Part 1 of the form is about you, so the applicant details. So the applicant organisation named on the form is the organisation that will be named in the agreement if you're successful, and that's who will pay funding to when you submit claims. You should provide the organisation's legal name, and if that's different to how you're known publicly, we'd suggest you give the public-facing name after the legal name in brackets. The lead applicant, so this is a person named in this section, needs to also be the person to sign the form in part 10. This part of the application also includes a brief description of the project, so this is something that you'd be happy for us to publish online or in printed publications in the event that you were successful. So a sort of 2 to 3 sentence summary of what it is that you want to do, what the project is. And then lastly, we've got a series of eligibility criteria, which you need to respond yes, no, NA to. If you respond no to any of these criteria, your application may be rejected. And I can show you what that looks like. So it's effectively just a table where you need to confirm that your project's in scope. Yeah, it's one of the more straightforward parts of the form. Part 2, and this is new to this year, is a project summary section. And this needs to stand alone from all of the other parts of your application. So if we receive more than 40 applications, which we suspect is highly likely, we will carry out an additional sift, which will be undertaken using information provided only in this part of your bid. And then the highest scoring proposals from this sift will progress to a full assessment. So, as I said, this needs to stand alone and make sense, so please don't assume that the panel will be reading further down in your application. Maybe once you've written the whole thing, go back to this section and just check that it makes sense and that the importance of the work you want to do has really been put across as simply and straightforwardly as possible. So part A, what will you do? Part B, how will you do it? C, the key outputs, what will they look like? And D, the impact on the sector. Some of these sections will be repeated throughout the rest of the application form. That's not a problem if you find you're repeating yourself in part 2 and part 3. This is just an initial sort of elevator pitch for your project to explain what it is, why it's important. Also in this part of the application form, we ask you to tick a box for current TRL or technological readiness level. So TRLs are basically a means for us to understand at what stage of the innovation life cycle your project is at. So we've funded a range of projects in the past. Some are quite low in TRL, so they're experimental, proof of concept. Some are higher and close to market. You don't need to show us that you're moving from TRL 2 to TRL 9. I think probably the panel would want to see that you're being realistic in what you think you can achieve within the timescale. This is more just to give us an immediate snapshot of where in that journey your project is and the sort of type of research you want to undertake. We've said here that if your project involves more than one work stream and they're at different readiness levels, you should reflect the TRL for the main technology or innovation that is the focus of your bid here. The one that's most crucial to achieving your project's objectives. So how do we score this section? It's scored on a scale of 0 to 10. I haven't copied the lowest scoring numbers here, but you can view them in our how to apply guidance online. Essentially, you want to be scoring between 7 and 10 to definitely pass the sift. 7 to 8 is defined as strong, and 9 to 10 is outstanding. We've got a bit of a dynamic threshold for the sift, so the minimum score by default will be set at 6, and if we receive more than 40 proposals that get 6 or more, we may raise the pass threshold to a 7, so you want to be aiming for a 7 as a baseline. And any proposals that score below the sift pass threshold will be rejected, so we won't review the remainder of your application. On to the main bulk of the application form, so the assessment questions following that initial sift. We've got 6 questions and also a question around degree of innovation, which will be independently assessed by the panel separately based on your application as a whole. So question 1, challenge. 2, approach innovation. I won't go through them because we'll be going through them one by one. But yeah, these are the areas that we'll be looking for, and at the top of each question you've got a description of what we want to see in response to each of those boxes. In the event of a tie, responses to challenge will be used to break the tie, with the highest scoring project awarded funding. So what do these look like? Again, like I said, you've got descriptions below each of the questions about what we want to see in that particular section. This question is new to this year, sector impact, and we'll give it quite a heavy weighting. So you've got A through E, which we're asking you to address. There are word limits for these sections. Please do try to keep to the word limits. We reserve the right not to review anything beyond that word limit that's significantly above the cap. But yeah, that's what the questions look like. There'll be each of those 6 and degree of innovation will be scored by our panel on a scale of 0 to 4. You need to answer all questions in this section, and each question has a word limit, and any information that significantly goes past that, as I've said, won't be evaluated. You can also append documents to your application in support of your answers. So in the past, we've had things like risk registers, quotes, or CVs. So that's quotes from partner organisations or, for example, nurseries who think that what you're doing sounds really valuable to them. I'd say if you are submitting supplementary information, don't assume that the panel will have a lot of time to review them. They're not going to be reading 10 CVs. They're going to be focusing on what's within your application form. But if there is something that you can and want to provide, we may have a look at that if we think it can help to understand what it is that you're trying to do and your team a little bit better. And you can also refer to your project timeline, which is a requirement that you need to submit as needed as well. For questions 1 to 6, these are the definitions that we use. So it's scored 0 to 4, 0 being unacceptable, 4 being excellent. These are again published on our how to apply guidance, so I'm not going to read through them. But you want to be aiming for at least sort of 3s and 4s for most of the questions to be in with a good shot of winning funding. Lastly, as I've said, degree of innovation will be assessed separately. So based on your application as a whole, the panel who have experience and knowledge of the tree and seed production sector will assess the degree of innovation of your project. So this is on a scale of 0 being none to 4 being very high. So again, this will be something that they'll read through their knowledge of the sector and what it is that your application is proposing to do. Part 4 of the application is work packages and outputs or outcomes. So if you're successful, the information that you provide in this section will form part of your grant agreement. So these are the outputs and outcomes that we'll be holding you to and will be used to monitor your project's progress. So in this section, you need to provide a numbered list of work packages, planned activities split by financial year for the project, the same for expected outputs split by financial year, a list of long-term outcomes and any knowledge transfer or exchange activities that you're planning for your project. And these work packages and activities should also be reflected in your project timeline. Our panel quite often find this section useful if they've gone through your the upper sections of your bid and they're not quite sure what it's going to look like on a sort of year-by-year basis and how the project's going to be seen through to completion. So this is a really useful piece of information for the panel as well as forming part of your agreement if you are successful. This is what the section looks like. So again, it's a series of free text boxes. So here you've got a numbered list of work packages and then your activities and outputs should be related to those numbers. Parts 5 through 10, so we're at the back end of the application form at this stage. Part 5 is finances, so you need to complete and submit a TPIF finance spreadsheet with your bid, and your response to the finance spreadsheet or how you fill that out will form part of your answer to question 6, which is additionality and value for money. So the panel will consider your finance spreadsheet and the costs that are quoted therein when considering question 6 and scoring it. Parts 6 through 10 are then effectively tick boxes and declarations. So 6 through 10 you need to read through the information carefully to make sure you understand the terms of the grant and the application form. And then part 9, we've got a series of declarations which you need to tick to make sure you've understood and agreed to those. Part 11 is authorisation. So once you've completed your form, your project timeline and your finance spreadsheet, you can sign the form. Your form needs to be signed with either a digital e-signature, so you can click and tap on the signature box in Adobe and follow the instructions, or we can accept a printed signature. So you print the form, sign it by hand, scan it back in. Unfortunately, we can't accept typed signatures, and the person signing the form needs to be the lead applicant named in Part 1. Finance spreadsheet. So we do quite often get questions about the finance spreadsheet because you are expected to provide a reasonable level of detail. So we suggest you read the instructions tab, which I'll show you an image of in a moment. And the purpose of this spreadsheet is that it will outline how you propose to spend the grant funding, and it will form your budget for the project if you're successful. You should list all the proposed project costs in your finance spreadsheet, and you need to specify the financial year that they will occur in. The Forestry Commission don't have the ability to move budget between financial year, so if you specify a financial year for a given line item, we won't necessarily be able to move that between financial years, and if you want to spend money on that line item, you'll need to find budget from elsewhere in the relevant financial year. And then if you're successful, you'll need to link each cost that you submit a claim for to the relevant item reference or line in your finance spreadsheet. Further guidance, so if you're VAT registered, the items that you list should be exclusive of any VAT that can be recovered. If you're unable to recover VAT on a cost, you should include the VAT in the amount that you provide. And if you can recover VAT on a cost, provide the cost exclusive of VAT. You should get quotes before you apply and make sure the costs are deliverable in the funding period, so achievable, and also in the financial year stated on your finance spreadsheet. For that reason that we can't move budget between financial years, and if you underspend, for example, in year 1, we can't move that budget forward, it will be lost. Agreements are likely to be issued in September or possibly October 2026, depending on whether you get a straight through agreement or whether you receive an offer in principle. And all funded work needs to be completed between the start and end of your agreement, so please don't start work on your project before. Any costs that are incurred outside of your funding period won't be eligible to claim back. And I think that's everything on, in terms of the general guidance. This is what the finance spreadsheet looks like. So you'll see at the bottom with a series of 5 tabs, starting with introduction, personnel, equipment depreciation, etc. We'd strongly recommend you read the leftmost tabs. This is the instructions before you start filling this out, just because it will save you making errors and then us coming back to you or you having to amend it at a later date. We'll move through from left to right what these tabs look like now. So personnel costs, you need to list all personnel who would work on the project here, and that's whether they're internal or external. And personnel rates can include overheads that will be incurred as a result of undertaking the project. Your equipment depreciation costs, you should complete this tab if you're applying for depreciation costs on equipment that will have a usable lifetime beyond the end of the project, or for something that will only be partially used on the project. These costs can only be claimed for the period the equipment is used on the project, and it needs to be claimed for in arrears in each financial year, in contrast to other items which I'll come on to. Equipment that you buy before the start of your funding agreement won't be eligible to claim depreciation costs on. And we've got a worked example of what this looks like, because I appreciate it's quite hard to explain or even read about. So if you plan to purchase a piece of equipment costing £10,000 under TPIF, it's got an estimated lifespan of 5 years, and you're going to buy it on the 1st of April 2027, to the start of the second financial year. It's going to be used only on your TPIF project, so we can cover 100% of the amount that it's being used on the project. We'd ask you to do 10,000 for the total cost of the item, divided by 5 by the item lifespan, and that will give you £2,000 per year in depreciation cost. So here you'd be able to claim a maximum of 2,000 toward the cost of that item in 27-28, and a further 2,000 in 28-29, and the further 6,000 would be funded from your own reserves. You don't need to apply depreciation to items that form part of your project outputs. So, for example, a robotic component of a novel system Instead, these items should be listed in other non-personnel costs. And they should be listed, for example, the name of that tab is equipment not depreciated. So other non-personnel costs. Here you should include all of the project costs that you haven't included in the first two tabs. And you can choose a cost type. And the four cost types you can choose are materials and supplies, works and services, equipment that's not been depreciated, like I've just mentioned, and travel and subsistence for each item that you're applying for. If you've got loads of small costs that are likely to be incurred, we'd suggest that you group them into a single line. For example, laboratory consumables, please don't put a line for pipette tips and then another for, buffer. Group them so that when we're reviewing and then when you come to claim, it makes it easier for all parties. And then, so other things you could group would be travel and subsistence for site visits, robotic components, or software development, rather than itemising them to the nth degree line by line. Finally, we've got the last tab, which will pre-populate with the information you've submitted in tabs 1 through 3. But you should check the details in this grant funding summary tab are accurate and correct. Local authorities, public bodies and universities should pay attention to line 16, which will automatically calculate the value of capital costs that you've applied for. If that figure exceeds a threshold of £50,000, we will need a departmental letter of authority to be submitted in support of your application. I think I'm going to come on to that in more detail in a moment. So if you're a local authority, public body or university, as I've said, if the value of your capital items that you're applying for exceeds 50k, you need to submit that letter of authority with your bid, and this letter needs to come from someone with decision-making capacity, acknowledge the total cost of the capital items, and confirm that the department has funds to deliver the capital costs of the project up front, and that they understand that claims will be paid in arrears. If you're not a local authority, public body or university, we may be in contact to request evidence of this if your application exceeds a particular threshold, but that's not something you need to concern yourself with when making your bid. I think the threshold's quite high. Terms and conditions. So we are getting close to the end for questions. You'll be glad to hear. Applicants are welcome to submit multiple TPIF bids, provided that if you're successful, you'd be able to deliver all of the proposals concurrently. So don't submit 3 bids if you'll only be able to deliver 1. Grants are paid in arrears by BACS transfer following receipt of claims. And all claims need to be supported by evidence of spend, so we expect invoices and timesheets for the items that you're claiming for. Multi-year funding is subject to annual review and agreements can be terminated either if future budgets are not confirmed, though we do have a degree of certainty of that with the multi-year SR settlement that we now have, or if a project is not delivering progress, outputs or value for money at the discretion of the FC. Reporting. So we have our agreement holders submit biannual project reports. There'd only be one in year 1, and you can see the sort of schedule for reporting if you were to be successful with a 3-year TPIF bid through this round in the table at the bottom of the slide. And templates for the reports will be provided to successful applicants sort of a few months before we expect that to be submitted. So what happens next? You can see a flow diagram on the right-hand side that outlines what the TPIF application process looks like from start through to finish. You need to submit all of your application documents to the TPIF mailbox on screen by midnight on 29th of July 2026, and we'll notify applicants of their funding decision, or we'll aim to by Thursday 16th of September. We're hoping to be able to stick to that deadline, though I would flag you can see, and I've mentioned previously as well, with offer in principles, which can be issued. So if you look at the bottom part of this where you've got, is the application successful? Yes, no, further info required. If you end up down the yes or no route, that's quite quick. We can get that agreement in place, or it's a straight rejection. If you end up in the left-hand column, which is quite often the case where we have to negotiate with applicants or to request further information so that our panel can make an informed decision on whether or not they'd support funding your project. This exchange can take a little bit of time, so it could be that if you receive an offer in principle, it might take you a couple of weeks to come back to our requests, and then us a week or so to come back to your request. So I'd anticipate that you could have a delay of an agreement not landing until potentially October 2026. I think that's the last slide. Yes. So apologies, that's a lot of talking from me, and I've gone through it quite quickly, and there's loads of information. We'll open the floor for questions. I think there's some in the chat, but I don't know if Naomi, do you want to read them out?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we can start with a couple of questions from Mary in the chat. First question is, are producing trees for agroforestry, including fruit and nut trees, in scope?
Yes, that would be considered in scope of TPIF.
Thank you. Second question is, how many meetings do we need to budget for with you as a funder? For example, will there be a kickoff meeting, then a quarterly review meeting, and how many of these can be online or face-to-face?
So we tend to be quite light touch with our agreement holders in terms of meetings. Typically, we'll meet with you at least once a year, or we'll aim to, and that will be either online or we'll try to do a site visit during the duration of the project where that's possible and where we've got resource to. I wouldn't anticipate more than 2 meetings per year with us as the funder. I think the main thing that you'll need to consider time for is submitting your reports that contain the detail that we need to show that you've progressed with your project in line with the agreement.
Thanks, Jack. I think I would also add that you can request meetings with us at any point during your the lifetime of your project, and we'll arrange something probably online. And we will also be hosting a introductory meeting to all successful grant recipients in the autumn. But that will only be after everyone has signed their agreements, where you can sort of give a few-minute presentation of what your project is about and what you aim to, what your outputs are going to be, basically. But yeah, we are always online, and you can get in touch with us through the TPIF mailbox as often as you'd like.
Thanks, Demi.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Next question from Ryan. Can I apply as an individual? Is there a risk if I pay for something for a project that it will be rejected and I won't be able to claim? Do you have to pay any funding back if you can't fulfill the requirements of the project? And will the things accounted for in the finance budget be paid back if they are confirmed? A few questions in there.
I'm just finding the wording of the question because there's a lot there.
Oh, sorry, it's in the main chat. So maybe
yeah,
just start with, can I apply as an individual?
That's a good question, actually. I don't think we've had an individual apply in the past.
Can I apply? If you're, we have had a sole trader before, I believe, a successful applicant, Ryan.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Let me just, if I double check the guidance in the slide and it doesn't say that it's not eligible, then you can apply.
Maybe the one before, Jack?
It does say you need to be a UK-based business sole trader or organisation. So I think you need to apply as a sole trader if possible. I'd also suggest our panel could have concerns around team resources and track record if you are an individual. There's sort of a single point of failure there. So I'd suggest collaborating with an organisation if that's possible for the project you've got in mind. If that's not possible, get in touch with us to describe what it is you're planning in the TPIF mailbox, and we can try and discuss what is feasible. Does that sound reasonable? Anything you'd add to that, Naomi?
No, nothing to add.
Sorry, there's more questions.
Yeah, is there a risk if I pay for something for a project that it will be rejected and I won't be able to claim?
If you've been successful and received a grant agreement from us, and in that grant agreement we would append your finance spreadsheet that you submitted on application, the items that you've bid for and listed there, you would be eligible to claim for, provided you're within the right financial year and within your budget. unless, I don't know, it was deemed to be out of scope of the grant funding. So if you were to purchase something that was wildly out of scope of what you'd bid for or didn't align with the grant funding agreement or objectives, then you wouldn't be able to claim. But I think that would be extremely unlikely. And as long as you're purchasing items that are required and necessary for your bid or for your project to complete, we typically wouldn't have an issue with paying that in arrears.
Yeah. To add to that, Ryan, we require every piece of thing or every item you claim for to be evidenced through an invoice or a receipt. So that needs to be in date and valid in order for us to pay it. So it might be that you have paid for an item and you paid by cash by accident. We can't pay that back if you've paid through it with it through cash. So that's all in our sort of claims guidance as well that you can read for just if you anticipate any spend like that as well.
And if agreement holders have had unusual elements of spend that they haven't anticipated when putting in their bid, we can accommodate them, but we ask that people email us to let us know what those are. So if you've got an unusual bit of spend that you think could be controversial, we'd have people reach out to us and just ask, is this permissible?
Yeah.
What's the next one?
Do you have to pay any funding back if you can't fulfill the requirements of the project?
So there are clawback provisions in the agreement, but given the nature of innovation and R&D, provided that you've evidenced that you've spent money and completed works in line with your grant agreement, it's unlikely that we'd be attempting to claw back from you. More likely, what we do is pay in arrears for what you've done to date, and then we terminate your agreement if what you're pursuing is no longer viable or possible.
Yeah. And I would also say that if you have if your grant agreement is, let's say, for £100,000 and you only did 75,000 pounds worth of work, we are not going to ask you to pay for the remaining £25,000. So yeah, just to reassure you on that. And then the last part is, will the things accounted for in the finance budget be paid back if they were confirmed? I think we've answered that.
I think so. If we've not, please come back to us,
Yeah.
Ryan, and we can try and advise.
Yeah, so if you were able to evidence everything you have paid for or spent, we will be able to pay that back if it's within your budget and in line with your project outputs. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to Oscar, who asked, is it advisable to show how we differ from previously successful applications and projects if applying in a thematic area that has seen a lot of projects awarded?
Could depend on the area, but I think it would be. In particular, I'd make sure you demonstrate how what you're proposing is applicable to UK tree and tree seed production. And if your work is complementary to a previous project, please do outline that if it will build on it. Or if it's attempting something in a different way, yes, please do include that. The other thing I was going to suggest, if there are live projects funded through round 4 in particular that are working on a very similar theme, I definitely encourage you to stress how your project is distinct from that, because our panel will be aware of what we're funding currently and they won't want to fund 2 of the same project. We've funded similar projects in the past because you can have different research approaches to try and achieve the same aim. But yeah, I think outlining how you're different from things funded in the past will only be a positive when it comes to appraisal for an innovation funding stream like this.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Next question from Mark. Is fruit tree rootstock production within scope?
I believe, yes, it would be in scope.
Lovely. These are all the questions at the moment. Feel free to put anything in the chat or the Q&A function. And equally, feel free to email us through the TPIF mailbox if you can think of anything else that you forgot to ask today.
Should we give it another few minutes just in case people think of anything?
Of course.
Thanks, Ryan. Oh, I think Rebecca's put the how do you rate your knowledge of TPIF now? So please do fill that poll in if you're able.
The session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube to rewatch. Oh, we've got a question from Yao. Hi, Yao. Current grant holder for a 1.5 year long project ending in March 2027. I'm eligible to apply in this round for an additional year, i.e. starting April 2027 on several value added aspects that follows nicely on the current project. So I think I was just asking if she could apply to carry on the project in April 2027, so for the 27-28 financial year.
Yes, you'd be definitely eligible to apply for that, yeah. Yeah. Just make it clear in your application that it links to a currently funded project. And I'd also make that clear in part 2 of the form as well, just in case, because that's the first bit that you'll have to, that will be read that goes through the SIFT.
Thanks, Jack. Next question from Austin. What is the preferred way to demonstrate the ability to fund project spend upfront?
I don't think, do we require that?
So if you fit into the financial viability evidence category, so if you're a public body, local authority, and university, you will need to submit a letter from your department to confirm that you have the funds to spend on the project. This is not, I don't think it's a requirement for TPIF to do this.
No, and I
or
think,
if you don't fit into this criteria.
and that letter would only be for if capital items will exceed 50k. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to advise on that. Maybe if you can explain if you have any previous track record of spending sort of funding or how those projects went, could that be something that we in the team and track record bit?
I think because the grant is paid in arrears, the risk is more to delivery than it is to our financials. So, yeah, I think we probably try and infer it from your, like Noemi says, your team track record. If you were a very small business or an individual, and you'd bid for 600k, for example, we might ask a question as to where your if that's where your reserves are coming from.
Yeah. Mary's asking, is the grant paid quarterly?
Good question, actually. Did we put? Is
I
it?
think he did.
We accept claims. Correct me if I'm wrong, Naomi. It's at the interim and end of year claim stages, so biannually, and is it on up to two additional dates of the agreement holder's choosing in a financial year. So it could be up to quarterly, but at times that work best for you, Mary. So we could accept, up to 4 in a financial year.
Yes, and I can add that if you have particular cash flow issues, you can email us to say that you would like to submit another claim that in addition to your 4, and we will discuss and maybe allow that as well. So for or more if you have a strong justification for why you need additional sort of the payment to be made more frequently than that. Any other questions?
Give them another minute or two just in case.
Yeah, we had a little flurry just now, so.
If you do think of anything after this session, please do email the TPIF mailbox on screen, or if you've got project-specific questions around eligibility, for example, please do reach out to us and we can try to advise as best we can.
Thank you.
Shall we leave it there if there's no other questions?
Yeah.
Can't see anything in the Q&A.
No. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Yvonne.
Okay.
Lovely. Thanks,
Thanks,
Louise.
Louise. Rebecca, are you able to, or can I end the event? I think I can end the event. Okay.
Thank you all
Thanks
for
all.
coming.
Best of luck with the bids, and please do get in touch if we can help with anything.
Thanks all.